Hi, everyone. My name is Amrutha Bavaraju. I'm currently a junior at the Rutgers Business School, double majoring in both marketing and business analytics information technology. I'm also a second year in the Women Build program, as well as a co-secretary for Rutgers undergraduate Women in Business. Thank you for attending this panel today on intentional power skills, why women are uniquely equipped for success in the new world of work. Leeson Stromberg, the CEO of Prism Work, will be moderating this panel. She is a best-selling author, award-winning independent journalist, and an in-demand speaker who has been on stage at numerous high-profile conferences. The panel today includes Dr. Maggie, who is an associate professor in the management department at California State University, San Bernardino. Her research interests include the impact of diversity on processes and outcomes of global teams, organizations, expectations in terms of teamwork and other soft skills, new forms of organizing such as remote and hybrid work, as well as assimilation into multinational organizations. Her research has been published in journals from several disciplines, including Management Communication Quarterly, Journal of Applied Communication, and Human Resource Management Review. Maria, who is an assistant professor at the Universidad de los Andes School of Management, her research focuses on virtual work, virtual teams, leadership, and gender differences at work. She has received several scholarships, including the Eiffel Excellence Scholarship. And last but not least, Pooja, who should hopefully be joining soon, is the Director of Strategy, Business Analytics, and Operations at Aruba. She is a corporate strategy and management consulting leader with over 20 years of experience leading growth and transformation programs by creating and executing strategy and operations in Fortune 50 enterprises. I'm excited about this panel and I'm interested in learning about how women are using their power skills to foster highly inclusive and productive workplace cultures that drive better business outcomes for all stakeholders. We hope you enjoy this panel today, and I will now turn it over to Leeson.
Oh, thank you so much. And yay, Pooja made it. We're thrilled. So glad to have you. And to everyone in the room, thank you for being here. This is going to be such a journey. I shared with Maria as we were waiting that last night I went to a talk by the dean of my business school, Haas Business School, UC Berkeley. And this was it didn't intend to be, she was talking about culture, but of course it all ended up talking about work, remote work, hybrid work, etc. So I just feel like this is the moment. So it's such an honor and a privilege to be with these amazing women and with all of you. We're going to have a great conversation. It looks like chat is closed. So if you have questions, please pop them into the Q&A on this. And we'll try to get to them. We're certainly going to try and leave time at the end for questions. But let's dig in. Maggie, I'm going to start with you. Your work is amazing. It goes straight to the heart of this modern debate about how and where we work and how we navigate all this. Perhaps you could sort of level set us with some of your research, give us some insight, and then help us understand big picture what's going on.
Sure. Thank you, Leeson. So in this particular study that I want to talk about, my co-author, who is my former graduate student, and I looked at experiences of frontline knowledge workers, women. So we interviewed 25 women to answer the question, how have employee expectations and motivations to work from home changed during the COVID-19 pandemic? And in this study, we were specifically interested in what we call frontline knowledge workers, as those who think for a living, but are non-managers, non-supervisors. So in terms of participants, they ranged from industries such as education, e-commerce, technology, and the findings show that women expect the hybrid work mode of work to be the default. So because this mode of work became more available to more employees, it really changed both attitudes and motivations of employees. So women's expectations regarding working from home changed because the work-life balance became more attainable. While in the beginning of the pandemic, women were really struggling with balancing the childcare duties and really setting boundaries between work hours and non-work hours, then they develop strategies to balance, right? So when working from home, women have more flexibility to take short breaks for little chores or to pick up kids from school. And also they perceive the benefits of both working from home and being in the office. So this is why the hybrid they feel like should be the default.
I love it.
Yeah. And then women are motivated by factors related to remote work. These in our study were work-life balance, autonomy, savings, mental health benefits too. Several participants mentioned that. And we're using framework called job characteristics model. And this is a very well cited and supported motivational framework. So because of this, the work from home is really tied to employee motivation. So this is why it is going to be really difficult to change, because it's tied to motivation and meaningfulness of work. So how women really feel about work from home is something that should not be taken away. So
I love it. I'm sure as researchers, you and Maria are in the thick of, this is so juicy, right? We're in the midst of a sociological study to really understand work and workplace culture. Thank you for that. I have a lot of follow-up questions, but I certainly want to hear from Maria and the work that you've done around the skills that women uniquely bring in this environment. Can you share about your research and what you've learned?
Yes, thank you, Listen. So hello, everyone. First, let me say that I'm very excited to be here on this panel, obviously with this amazing woman, and also happy to share my research with Professor Sharon Hill that is called Gender Differences in Virtual Collaboration Effectiveness. So in this research, we examine how men and women differ in their virtual collaboration effectiveness, which, as we know, is very relevant to our discussion today about women in hybrid and remote work. So before jumping into our findings, it is essential to say that we know from research that given the challenges of virtual work, individuals seems to require a new set of characteristics and competencies. And this is because virtual work environments seem to have collaboration challenges due to the reduced cues and information. And we also know from research that it is more difficult, for example, to build relationships and to develop trust. And related to this, research on virtual teams suggests that some behaviors may promote interactions in a virtual environment. For example, related to how employees use technology to interact, if they can use technology effectively, and if they are supportive and responsive in their interactions. And on the other hand, we also know from research that women have a propensity toward coming out goals, and their communication style also tends to be more relational. They are more likely to focus on relationship building and socially related activities. So research, for example, has shown that when women lead virtual teams, they share more their leadership than men. Also, when they lead virtual teams, their teams tend to be more cooperative and they use more participative communication. And also research has found that women perceive a higher usefulness of this computer-mediated communication. And these individual characteristics seem to be compatible with the challenges that we have in virtual environments. So moving on to the research findings, based on a theory that explains that employees do better at work when their skills and abilities match their work environment, we examine if there were differences between men and women when working in virtual teams. And across 2 studies, we found that women tend to have higher levels of virtual teamwork situational judgment. And this is the extent to which an individual knows how to successfully handle the virtual challenges and their ability to use that knowledge to respond to those situations appropriately. And finally, these knowledge and abilities make women more effective collaborators in these virtual environments.
I don't want to cut you off. Are we pausing there for a sec?
No, that's.
I'm okay. So let me make sure I'm summarizing right.
Yes.
Women are better equipped, basically, to handle and navigate and lead in a virtual environment, is what you're saying, right?
Yes.
You know, in terms, I mean, not every woman, obviously, and blah, blah, blah. Which
Yes.
I will share with you personally at my company, Prism Work. We have a number of companies that brought us in to help them navigate the remote work dynamic and up-level their culture, et cetera. And anecdotally, I would say that was absolutely true in our experiences with our clients. But it also calls to question this fascinating thing that most of the people who are demanding that we go back into work full-time all the time are leaders who happen to be men or identify as men. So I'm wondering if maybe there's this unconscious, I'm not skilled at remote work, ergo, I need you to be in the office next to me because that's where I'm best skilled, men. Do you think that's feeding into, Pooja? I really want to hear from you in a second, but I just want to follow up. Do you think that's feeding into this kind of pressure to go back to work because there's this unconscious awareness that the men who are making decisions aren't necessarily skilled in this remote work communication style, this remote work leadership required?
I mean, it can be happening. Obviously, this is not what our research specifically explains,
Yes.
But it is true that if men are not comfortable working in these virtual environments, and they will tend to go to the office more than women, right? So they don't, maybe they tend to be, I mean, here we are not obviously not talking about every man or every woman, but tendencies.
Yes.
So they may tend to prefer to go to the office because that's how they can control the people that are there.
Interesting. Pooja, you are our operating goddess. You're the one who've basically been doing this for a very long time and thriving and succeeding as a quote unquote remote, leader, director, executive. Can you talk to us about your lived experience? Like what's it like for you? How are you navigating this and how are you succeeding so incredibly well?
No, definitely. Thank you, Listen, and Maria and Maggie, and all the technology issues that we face this. Trust me, it was not planned, okay? It's just, we were just trying to showcase you how technology is and what happens with people who work virtually versus who are in the room. So I heard really great things, Maggie, from you and Maria from your research. And it was just like, ooh, I have lived this life, right? You guys are kind of explaining that to me. So I would say, yes, there are a lot of challenges. Maggie, I would say you talked a lot about being a mother. And when, you have babies and kids, or sometimes you may have older parents, you do need to have a little bit more flexibility, and typically women kind of become the caregiver. So having a virtual kind of environment from a workplace perspective definitely allows us to not only take care of our family, but be able to take care of whatever is needed from a work perspective. Accountability. Being in a virtual environment doesn't necessarily mean that we are not accountable for things that we have signed up for, right? And Maria, you brought a very great point around relationships and how it could be a little bit challenging in building in a virtual environment. So some of the things that I have personally worked over the years is you still set up some Zoom calls, right? Or phone calls with the colleagues. So you can still do some water calls kind of engagement, building relationships with your colleagues. And in a global company, it is a little bit easier because a lot of the folks are already, able to navigate some of those things. But if you are one of the virtual person, which is a very one or two location and everybody is in office, then that could be a little bit challenging. And listen, as you said, I mean, I would say what Maria said. We cannot generalize that this is like all male executives telling us go back to office. I am one of those executives who actually do ask my team to also go back to office certain days a week, and really collaborate, because there are opportunities when you are in the same team, in the same group, in the same room, you can achieve a whole lot better. You feel much more connected to your employees. But then a lot of times when you do need to be into a virtual environment and you need to get your work done. So I would say we are actually living in a great I would say world where we have the flexibility of being virtual and hybrid, right? So you can be on site, you can be virtual, you can be hybrid, you can go in few days. And that has been one of my success stories, to making sure that I am working from home, but I'm traveling, I'm meeting my colleagues, I'm meeting my leaders, I'm meeting my team wherever they are across the world. And I'm also setting up those quick 15 minutes check-in where I don't talk about work. I'm just like, hey, how are you doing? Right? Trying to build those relationships that we would typically build going on lunches or, having a coffee chat kind of thing at workplace. So hopefully that helps a little bit from my perspective.
Pooja, that's so wonderful. Can you share with us how you evolved into a remote/hybrid career? Because you did it well before the pandemic, if I recall correctly. Tell us how that transpired for you. Did you face resistance from your bosses? What happened?
Actually, it was the other way around. So when I was doing my master's from Kent State University, Ohio, I had an opportunity to do an internship with my current company, Hewlett Packard Enterprise. And a part of my internship was virtual, and I just couldn't get it. I'm like, I want to see more people. I want to be in office. And we have a very strong culture of a hybrid telecommuter kind of an environment, being a technology company. When I was offered a full-time job after my graduation, again, I was really looking forward to go in office. And my manager told me, well, I think you should just work from home. That will be better. And I'm like, okay,
no.
20-year-old something, like I want to be around people. And he at that time said, well, at some time you'll have kids, and you will be very happy that you are actually in a working kind of remote kind of a mode. And I felt like I did not appreciate it at that time. But as I had kids, as I kind of learned that there are a lot of leaders who are actually never going in office. They're working from their home, or they travel and then they show up. So it's not really, when I kind of started thinking, this is not going to limit my career, I just need to figure out how to make this work. I really started excelling at it, right? So when COVID hit, a lot of us were actually pretty, what's the big deal? We already know how to work in a virtual plus hybrid kind of environment. But I've seen a lot of my friends, especially in New York City area, we have a lot of financial industry and folks who go into banks and institutes which were very strict, like, hey, go to office and you can only do your work in office, are now kind of transitioning into a hybrid mode, like come in few days, do certain things. So I think this is a big step for women in general and their career, because now we have a lot of options. We can be in whatever phase of our life, but we don't have to take a step back for our career. We can take care of our family. We can also take care of our career.
I want to just completely validate everything you're saying. The research I did for my book, my first book, Work, Pause, Thrive, where I interviewed 186 women, surveyed 1,500 more of highly successful women to find out how they navigated work and family. The fascinating story was that the majority of them had actually downshifted in some way, shape, or form, but the number one thing they wanted was the structure you have, Pooja. They said they would have never had to take a downshift if they actually had what I call time mastery. I think, Maggie, that term might really relate to you and your work. One of the things that I find fascinating is recent research I saw that said, excuse me, women are resistant or afraid to ask for remote work because they're afraid it's going to ding their careers. Maggie, do you have any thoughts on that, or how do we navigate this so it's not it doesn't hold us back, it actually pushes us forward, as it did with Pooja?
I'm not sure if I'm able to answer this question accurately based on my findings, so that working remotely doesn't hold us back. The thing is that we're in a really good market for workers, right? We have very low unemployment rate. We've just experienced the big quit. So the power is in the hands of workers, men or women, right? So they have a choice. And that is actually, I feel like, a good trend, because let's say you're a younger female, like Pooja said, you don't want to work a majority of time from home. You have that choice to take a different path, to choose a different employer. So I think it's not, for a while at least, it's not going to hold women back, because they have a choice of work mode.
Choice is good, of course, we all want choices, but I read a study that said that female employees not at their desks while working remotely were seen not engaged in work-related activities 47% of the time. Mm-hmm. For men, it was only 34% of the time, which means that the leader, the manager, had brought in a bias around what women were doing versus what men were doing around remote work. So how do you do this so that it doesn't, there's no, perceived biases or unperceived, like unconscious biases that come into this negotiation? I'd love to hear from each of you on this. Maggie, your thoughts. We'll start with you first. How do we do this?
How do we overcome biases related to perception of how busy we are, and
how committed exactly productivity, and why there's this perception gap between women's commitment and productivity versus men when we're working remotely?
I see. I think it comes from traditional gender roles. I think it's going to take a while overall to change the gender roles, right? Just 50 years ago, still majority of providers were men. And this finding is honestly not very surprising for me. I feel like the hybrid mode of work is changing everyone's attitudes to remote work, perhaps attitudes to gender roles. And we're shifting towards more different measures of productivity, right? So when you're working from home, overall, you have much more flexibility, but you still have to be accountable for results, right? So the managers, it does not mean that they have to be monitoring employees more closely, but overall, the nature of work or the working hours even need to be adjusted, right? The 9-to-5 model, I honestly don't believe in that. It was invented 200 years ago.
The Ford thing, right? I mean, I think you're right. Like, back to time mastery, make it about my job. I'll get the job done in a time that works for me. Maria, one of the things I'm wondering, could you think about that and answer this question? I'm thinking about the skills connected here, right? If I'm a leader and I have this bias, how do we convince these leaders, no, don't bring your biases into this, recognize them, and don't bring the biases into this? How do we do that?
Well, I would say first, we need to be aware that we all have this unconscious bias. They have it, we have it. I mean, there are many of these bias. One of this is proximity bias. And I believe organizations and leaders and hiring management should start shifting the focus from where the work happens to how the work happens. So it doesn't matter where you are, but what you're doing and how you're doing it. And for these, organizations will obviously need training on these skills that are needed, because these hybrid work environments or virtual work environments need special skills. We don't have like the small talk in the coffee maker, so we need to communicate better in a virtual work environment. We need to learn what technology to use for our specific task. We need to know that if we have a conflict, it's probably better to have a face-to-face communication than a virtual communication or a text communication. And I think what we need to do is to provide training to all employees and also leaders, so that these skills can be learned. Because we think that after the pandemic, we all learned how to work in hybrid and virtual work environments, and that's not true.
Okay, I didn't pay her to say that, people, but that literally is why I wrote my latest book, Intentional Power, which is literally all the skills she's talking about, and why modern leaders have to have these skills: humility, empathy, accountability, right? Transparency, resiliency. Anyways, I just, yes, everything Maria said. But Pooja, you've been on the ground navigating this. How have you navigated this kind of perhaps bias that you might have faced, or those skills that you had to grow that you probably weren't trained for? Frankly, I'm sure they didn't give you training on this. How did you do that?
Well, actually, what Maria said, the proximity bias, and it all starts from culture, right? The company's culture top down. We actually have management training that talks about all these different biases that a person can have, and proximity bias is definitely one of those. So there are two aspects: one cultural, which we talked about, and it should be, leaders tops down, HR, especially if your company is moving into a hybrid or a combination of a teleworker plus on-site workers. We need to be very thoughtful as a manager to keep aside our biases and try to get more information before we make a decision in our head, like, hey, so and so person is out and they're not on the desk, or they are not available on the chat. Maybe they're not working right now. So those are the trainings. But what I would also like to focus on is something that we as women leaders can also do on our side. If the company has a culture, great. If the company does not have a culture, we can try to do something on our side where we can basically create our own brand. If I am expected to deliver something, I am going to make sure that I am effectively communicating. I'm either providing what is needed from me on time or before time, or I'm keeping everybody in the loop, right? So one of the things I'll tell you, when I had my two kids. Yeah, I had two kids. At that time, two young kids, less than 5 years old. At that time, I asked my leader, give me the most important two goals that are going to make you successful for this year, and you let me do it. I will not do anything else, but I will make sure that you're successful on your two goals. And I made sure that those two goals happened, and I had to work, around the different time zones, taking care of kids while I'm doing my work. And that's the reputation I built. So this is something that we as women leaders can do, because then I got a reputation in the organization. If you want something done, you just hire Pooja. She's going to figure it out. She may not know how to do it, but she's going to figure it out, right? So I would say two things. Culture, very important. If you feel like your manager may think that you are out, give them a heads up and let them know, hey, you might have seen I was not available, blah, 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 or you tried to reach me. I just want to let you know something came up, but here is what I did. Here is where I am on the project. How can I help you? Did you need something immediately from me? So I think having very, very open communication in a virtual setting is also something that goes hand in hand. It's also a manager's accountability and responsibility, plus us as women leaders. We need to be very open and upfront and transparent in our communication.
I love what you've just said. We can't just externally blame the culture we're in, blah, blah, blah. We have to take ownership too. We have to show up and, as you did so beautifully. Look, I'm going to let me help you be successful. I'll do these two things and I'm going to do them great and I'll do it. So, and look, as a CEO of a company, if someone came to me and said that, I'd like, great, yours, go run with it. We call that Swiss Army knife. Like, you don't have all of it, but it just talents keep coming out. But so the question I would ask Maggie, in your research, when you're hearing Pooja, what does this bring to light for you when you think about the women, the 25 women that you, frontline workers, what do you think? Did they have these skills? Did they need training? Like, what was your experience, Maggie?
Yes, I actually asked a set of questions about training. And most of them did not get any training at all. Some small portion received training on either basic technical skills. So, for example, how to create Zoom meetings and how to do breakout rooms, things like that. Or if they had to transition to a new phone system where it's their cell phone receiving calls, things like that. But basically no one has received training on the people skills, the people aspect and relationship and leadership, how it needs to be conducted, when working from home. And this was kind of concerning. So the only good thing was that some women reported that they had training on maybe some physical aspects of working from home, because we're much less likely to move. So it is less about training, but guidance from their managers on having to take breaks. So more of the ergonomic aspects of work, getting up and setting up maybe even alarm to remind you to take breaks, things like that.
It's so interesting. So the frontline workers, the individual contributors, as I typically call them, your experience is they're just not getting the training about how to succeed in this environment. And again, that totally reinforces what I'm seeing in my work when I work with companies and leaders. It's also what we wrote about in the book. Look, the hard skills you're talking about, frankly, those are easy. You learn them. They're just, you get over them fast, right? Yeah, we've now all figured out Zoom for the most part, right? It's those quote unquote soft skills, the soft quote unquote people skills. We call them power skills, because if you don't have them, you will not succeed. This is in this new world of work, you've got to have them. So Maria, is there a list of skills specifically that we could tell our audience, hey, go and build this skill set, go ChatGPT, how to build this skill, right? Is there a list that came up with for you that you saw in your research?
Well, I think collaboration, to learn how to collaborate effectively across culture or disciplines, it's one of the most important skills today. And obviously, this is very important in remote and hybrid work environments, because when you're working with 5 different cultures, everything it's very different. So you cannot make any assumption. You have to really be transparent of what do you communicate. So obviously, collaboration, communication is key, because
as Pooja made clear, right? It's like just communicate all the time.
Yes, you have to have assertive communication, clear communication, transparent. You have to set the norms and the rules up front of when are you going to communicate, when are you going to answer, so that those bad assumptions that we always make about people don't we don't really have them, like he's not working or she's not working because she just doesn't care, and she has a personal issue and we don't know. So we need to be very clear about everything that is happening in our context, and this implies formal and also informal communication, like those. I mean, there's a question in the question and answer related to that, and we need to replace this informal communication somehow. We need to build this trust. Building trust is very important as well, and it's also related to proximity bias, because the way to change our minds is to trust people that they can do their work. I mean, that
treat them like adults, you mean?
Exactly. And if we choose them for our team, well, it's because they have the capabilities and the abilities and knowledge to work. So we really have to trust them. They can do it wherever they want, but they are going to do it,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in our research, what we kind of mapped it. So we went out and surveyed hundreds of executives, and then ended up doing a much bigger global analysis with thousands of leaders. And it boiled down to kind of 6 core modern skills. They are humility, And when we say humility, it's I don't know everything. I don't know about your culture. I'm going to learn more. I'm coming with curiosity, right? It's not just, it's more like I'm bringing humble enough to know I have so much to learn from you, et cetera, right? Then there's empathy, right? We know that empathy, certainly during well, actually all the time, really, really, really matters. There's accountability. And that accountability, as Pooja was saying so beautifully, like, I'm going to get that job done, right? But what you said underneath what you said was, and I'm going to make you, boss, look really good. And by the way, that's going to make our team look really good. And by the way, our team can have an impact. So it's kind of like that flowing out of accountability that's just not about getting your job done, but how can you impact your team, your company, the world at large, right? Then there was resiliency. You have to be willing to fail and learn from those failures and pick yourself up and grow again. Transparency was all about communication and trust, right? So much about, building that trust. And then, of course, inclusivity, right? We've talked about how does Leeson navigate, to Colombia, to Bogota, to Maggie, to Pooja, to everyone. How do we cross our cultural, divides or whatever it is, and come to a place of actually making innovation and doing all the great things. So we call it Hardy, and we are loving that. Pooja, you are the model of Hardy. I've been listening to you now and really hearing that. When you're looking for the teams that you hire and your team and how you're supporting them, are there specific skills that you want them to have that are maybe these power skills, skills that aren't technical, but are literally like, what do I need to have a successful team?
Yes, and I think we talked about a lot of those skills right now: collaboration, communication, having empathy, being able to reach out to different cultures and putting yourself in others' shoes and still trying to be accountable and trying to get work done. A lot of these soft skills actually, people may have it or people may not have it, and that's why we in our company, in my organization, myself, my leaders, we take a lot of time to mentor and coach and try to talk about these soft skills. And my way is saying, hey, we spend a whole lot more time with each other versus what we spend with our family. So there are going to be days when we are going to be frustrated with each other because, hey, you were supposed to do something and I have dependency on you. What we are going to do is we are going to have a very open communication and conversation so we can put into each other's shoes and say, how are we going to make this work? So we talk a lot. We actually do talk a lot about hey, this happened, and because of this, we were not able to do this. Instead of blaming each other, how do we do the after action review, right? So we do a lot of that. We do talk a lot about getting the work done, but besides getting the work done, in our virtual world, we celebrate birthdays. My team is in India, in Mexico, in US. So those are the things that we kind of try to do, which would typically happen in the on-prem environment or in an office environment. It's difficult to build some soft skills, but you have to, as a leader, you have to keep talking. How are you thinking? What do you think? What are you expecting people to do? It's not only the work that I expect my team to do, but I also expect them to, if somebody comes and requests for help, it's we before I. That's one of the core principles that we have in our organizations, we before I. We want to demonstrate that we are not here just for ourselves, but we are here for common goals, and we are here for our company.
I just love that. We call it we before me leadership. Me leadership was sort of old leadership, the way so many current leaders, CEOs were trained, right? But now there's a whole new way of leading, and frankly, they're struggling. So here we are, Maria, said, women have got these skills, not saying that all women do or men don't, but here we are uniquely qualified in this environment.
And we recognize people for demonstrating we before I behaviors.
Perfect.
So that's why, okay, if I share something with a colleague, or if I help a colleague be successful, that doesn't mean that all the recognition is just going to go to him or her. It's like, we have that culture of collaborative recognition. So
oh, that's so important. Collaborative recognition, right? All the pieces that required to make this successful. I love that. One thing that one of our leaders does that I was so impressed by, she does a pre-mortem. Before, it's not just a post-mortem, not just analysis after the project was done, but it was she does a pre-mortem. What are all the things that could happen? What are the contingencies we need to do? How are you set up for success in this? What help could I give you, or does your colleagues need to give you in advance of that? And they spend a lot of time of that before they launch on a new initiative. And that thoughtful pre-mortem allows them to figure out what might fail and what not. We have, oh, Maggie, you're just about to answer. Nellie asked a great question. Maggie's typing an answer. Maybe Maggie, you can verbally share. But so the question is, do you think that virtual work levels the playing field, since we no longer rely on random water cooler chats or other happenstance moments to be noticed? Or does it enforce, in proximity bias and we can't get over it? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, I can answer briefly because I believe we're at time, but
I can keep talking.
totally believe that because the only challenges, or it's the biggest challenge, that the networking, the socializing needs to be planned and pre-planned and thoughtful, because we tend to be close in our silos, right? So there is no spontaneous interactions in the hall where you can hash out a new idea, right, with your team members. It needs to be much more mindful and gives more responsibility on the leaders, right? You need to really schedule one-on-ones, schedule the informal events, or maybe use the face-to-face for socializing mainly.
I love that. So since we are at time, one piece of advice, Maggie and Maria, that you would give to leaders, and Maggie, Maria, and Pooja, and then one piece of advice you'd give to women themselves. So fast. We'll do a round. Pooja, since you're closest to me on my scene, what would you do? One piece of advice.
One advice to leaders would be, again, don't assume. We heard a lot about biases. Go talk to your employees. Try to understand what's going on in their life, and you will be amazed at what people are willing to share with you. And one advice to all the women leaders here would be, you are in charge of your destiny, so never assume that there are places you can't do this job, you can't go work in this company, you cannot transition from this role to another role. Lisa actually one time told me that you just need a yes, right? Just reinforcing that you just need a yes, and that's the mantra. We are in a hybrid world. There is a company that you will find works for you. If you want a job that is office job, you're gonna get it. If you want a virtual job, you will have it. And there will be somebody who will be there, ready to say yes to you, believe in you. Just go for it. There are no limits, and when you think about there are no limits, you can make your own destiny, you can make your own life. I will tell you, I have done things that I felt like I'll not be able to do in my company. I've changed roles multiple times. You just need a sponsor. You just need to be focused on your goals, and you just need to trust and believe in yourself. That's it. That's the only advice I'm going to give you. Trust in yourself. And world is limitless.
I love it, Pooja. Thank you. Maria?
I will say understand that virtual collaboration skills are needed and that they can be learned, or also the power skills that you're mentioning. So we really need to help employees to understand that they have to learn how to build trust, how to create relationships with people remotely, and create the spaces for this, intentionally, as Maggie was saying. Now we don't have the coffee machine anymore, so we need to be more intentional about building these relationships and developing trust and cohesion in teams, and this can be learned, so as organizations have to teach employees and leaders how to work on this. on these environments.
I love it. Thank you.
So
Maggie?
I
Oh.
hate to cut us off, sorry, but
Oh, we could keep talking forever, clearly.
I'm here. How are you guys? It's so good to see you all. I'm cutting you off because we have another session starting. We have a whole bunch of people trying to get into the room. But
Absolutely.
Jason, last minute thoughts from the panel. You want
We've all given our last minute thoughts. What I would say to the next generation of leaders that are listening in on the room is that to quote Pooja, the world is your oyster. Use your intentional power to make change for yourself, for those around you. Get the skills, because the skills that used to lead to success aren't the skills that we need today. Build those skills and connect with each of us on LinkedIn. We're there. We're here for you. We support you and you're thriving. It was a pleasure and honor to be with these amazing women. I hope today has gone successfully for you, Lisa, and the Rutgers team. Brilliantly managed, brilliantly done. Thanks all.